Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Castlevania Rondo of Blood. In the last part, we cleaned up alternate stage 2 as well as stage 3, and now we're in alternate stage 3 to clean up the stage 3s proper. Worth noting, this is one of technically two stages in the game that has more than two ways to access it. Namely, you can access it by either defeating the alternate boss of either stage 2 or alternate stage 2, the Bone Golem, or by going through the Ferryman route at the very start of alternate stage 2 and going past all the mermen. In here, we actively have a nice little hidden room that not only has a 1-up for you, but also every single sub-weapon that either character can carry. For what's coming up here, I'd recommend you bring in the Axe with Richter or the Egg with Maria. Because we have a mini-boss here against the slowly arriving giant ghost. So this thing is gonna come down slowly from the top of the screen and home in on you. And there's 3 eyes you need to attack in order to destroy it. All the while, it's gonna have skulls that try to just orbit around it and deal damage. A well-placed axe will one-shot it, same with a well-placed egg with Maria. Otherwise, worth noting for the start of this stage, you do slowly sink into the mud down there, and I think if you're in it long enough, it will outright kill you. Not that that's ever happened to me unless I just completely stop paying attention. And also, on the far right of this specific room, you don't want to immediately go through the door you see. Instead, go towards the bottom of the screen and whip at the wall. Doing so is going to unlock a secret passageway for us. This leads us towards our next maiden we need to rescue in the second of the 4 in total. Also worth noting, where that wall meat I got a moment ago was, I believe that's where you actively unlock either Symphony or Rondo in the remake. Our second mating awaiting down here is the green-haired Terra.
Who's there?
Excuse me.
Oh, a guardian angel. Sent from heaven to rescue me.
The path up to here is safe. Hurry back to the village. Understand?
Pardon, but what is your name?
I'm Richter Belmont, the vampire hunter.
Richter. Go with God's protection.
Also worth noting, every maiden after Maria has an alternate cutscene you can see if you rescue them with Maria instead of Richter, so we're going to showcase both for the remaining 3.
Who's there? Sister. Surely you're help sent from heaven. You are an angel. Please hurry back to the village. And be careful. Wait. What's your name? Maria Renard, vampire hunter. Maria, I know God is watching over you.
God, how Maria is rendered there has always bugged the shit out of me. I don't know why. Now, worth noting ahead of time for whenever I get to the remake, they actively do mostly leave the maidens in the same positions, but they do add a few more barriers of entry to your pathway. Namely, they add some barriers quite literally you can't break without certain other items found in other stages and all that. My guess for why they changed this is twofold. For one thing, they wanted to make a new face for the final boss locked behind them, so they probably wanted to make it a bit more of a trial to find them to begin with. And B, they probably also just kind of wanted to mess with veterans, which not for nothing, a lot of remakes do like doing here and again. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy IV 3D. The majority of what remains in this stage isn't too rough outside of the bone dragons from the original Castlevania showing up in a couple of places. And this path ultimately terminates in us fighting the Minotaur again. So along the way, let's start talking about this game's voice cast. Starting off, Richter, alongside most of the rest of the cast, technically has 3 voices. In the original PC Engine release, he was voiced by Jin Horikawa, who also voiced Digitamamon in a lot of the early Digimon shows, as well as Mesa and Nightman.exe in the Japanese audio track for the Battle Network anime. Meanwhile, in the version of the game found on the PSP remake, found here also in the Requiem collection, he's voiced in English by David Vincent and in Japanese by Kiyoyuki Yanada. The former also voiced Wind in Portrait of Ruin, Alan Richard in the Trails in the Sky English trilogy, that Kakyoin-looking dude from Resident Evil Revelations, Gilgamesh from Fate, Senketsu from Kill la Kill, one of the major voices for Robin from Fire Emblem, and Nanami in Jujutsu Kaisen, as well as being Grimjaw in Bleach. The latter, who took over as Richter starting in Symphony of the Night, I believe, also voiced Shredder in the Japanese dub of the 80s TMNT show, Andromon in Digimon, Megatron in Transformers Armada, Desert Man in the Battle Network anime, Serpent in Mega Man ZX, alongside many other roles. Maria also has 3 voices tied to her due to this. In the PC Engine release, she's voiced by Yoko Tepozuka, who's overall most famous for being the Japanese voice of Charmy Bee period in the Sonic series. Meanwhile, in the PSP remake, she's voiced by Michelle Ruff, replacing Kimberly Forsyth from Symphony of the Night. Meanwhile, in Japanese on the PSP, she's voiced by Hekiru Shina. Michelle Ruff's well known by this point, but to cover some big roles, she's Rukia in Bleach, Shara in Trails, often the voice of Fujiko in Lupin III. She's Zoe in Digimon Frontier, Etna in most disguise after the first one, Sea Viper in Street Fighter, Yoko from Gurren Lagann, Kawakami in Persona 5, and has been the voice of Cream the Rabbit in Sonic since roughly Sonic Colors DS, I believe? Hekiru Shina, on the other hand, took over voicing Maria in Symphony of the Night. She also voiced Mega Man in the Upon a Star OVAs, voicing him again in Power Battles and Power Fighters, alongside Hikaru in Magic Knight, Ray Earth, Tails in the old Sonic OVA, Celestia in the first Danganronpa, Dr. Hinagiku in Pokemon Masters EX, and also voiced Yuyoko Saigyoji in the console release of Kumajo Remilia 2, formerly known to us in the West as Toho-Vania 2. Meanwhile, the only other character we've heard speak thus far is the recently rescued Terra. In the PC Engine release, she was voiced by Hiromi Murata, who seemingly only ever voiced her and Anne-Rose von Grunwald in the 1992 film Legend of the Galactic Heroes Gaiden: Golden Wings. Here in the PSP release, though, she's voiced in English by Karen Strassman and in Japanese by Eri Sendai. The former also voiced Fima in the dub of the Ys 2 OVA, Soifon in Bleach, Misha in Art Tenelico, Candace in Mayor, Aegis in Persona 3, Rosa in Final Fantasy IV 3D, Nanako in Persona 4, Fi in Virtue's Last Reward in its sequel, and has been the voice of Rouge the Bat since Sonic Free Riders. The latter also voiced Erika in Metabots, Nanami in Jinro the Wolf Brigade, Rei in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, as well as any of her appearances in the later Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, as well as Dronya in Labyrinth of Refrain alongside many other roles. Once again, because the Minotaur is the main route boss fight, defeating them here will take us to main stage 4. But we still have to go take care of the alternate route here in alternate stage 3, and it's a pretty quick one to take care of too. Namely, not too far after we first rescued Terry, you might have noticed there was this little gap in the floor that seemed really mysterious, but you also might have noticed when I was upstairs here, I was attacking the ball and chains, and if you hit a specific part of their chain, the ball falls. Hence why there's that one just kind of broken there off to the side. If you drop, I think it's the second one here, and then fall back down, or go back down the stairs to the prior floor, you can fall back down there and almost get hit by the same spike ball. That's already the end of the alternate route. We're already at the Dogether boss once again. And once we defeat Dogether here, we'll once again be taken to alternate stage 4, but we gotta go do main stage 4 first. In the meanwhile, I guess I could talk about another one of Maria's sub-weapons, because we haven't seen it yet. One you basically will never see me use is the turtle you might have noticed dropping here and again. That is the Genbu, so it's Zhuanwu from Chinese mythology. That spawns a shell around Maria that protects her from a lot of attacks, but she can only really tiptoe and your offense options are pretty limited while using it. Its item crash is just another relative screen nuke. It's okay, but not something I really like using. Another I at least showed off the main use of during, I believe, Maria's run of Stage 2 was the Songbook, which is her equivalent to Richter's Bible. When you use that, Maria will shoot several notes out of her mouth implying she's singing, and it'll do damage to anything in front of you. Its item crash, though, is probably one of my least favorite. Specifically, it spawns, I think, like 10 to 12 music notes across the screen that will stay there and deal damage to enemies that touch them, but because they're usually high up on the screen, they're not going to be able to reach most enemies. Not something I really like using. Finally, there's the one I've talked about here and again, especially in this part, Maria's Egg. When she uses that normally, she tosses it in an arc, and when it lands, I think like 6 birds will hatch from it and move upwards. Really good for taking care of the giant ghost mini-boss here in alternate stage 3. The item crash of that, I believe, causes a circle of birds to spawn in with a red bird in the center that will then spin towards your current direction. It's not too damaging, but it's good for clearance. With that, we're now into main stage 4. This is perhaps my least favorite stage in the game. Well, least favorite or second least favorite, it really depends on how I feel about stage 6 on any given day. More on why with that specific stage later in the LP. What makes this stage so rough is that it's far and away the most hazard-ridden stage in the game off the top of my head. If it's not outright spikes, it's rotating spike wheels. It's switches that can cause spikes or blocks that push you into spikes to show up. It's, on one specific route at least, a bunch of rolling boulders that are trying to take you out. In the end of the stage, it's going to be ball and chains that you can admittedly whip around to try and confuse how they move around in a circle, but also there's platforms you need to jump on nearby, and it's just really weird to get around. All the while I have to deal with either skeletons throwing bones, a shitload of fleamen, or in the later sections of them returning axe armors, but specifically the axe armor's red cousin, who really likes to spam this one charge attack where they just blitz straight at you, and jumping over them is really hard to do in most instances due to the weirdness of your jump arc relative to their movement. Worth noting, blue axe armors can also do that same charge attack, but they only do it after losing their shield, and by the time they've lost their shield, you've almost killed them anyway, so you're more than likely not going to see it. Up there is not the alternate route worth noting, that's just another route through the stage. The alternate route that leads to the alternate boss is actively not until right before the end of the stage. While I make my way through this stage, let's start talking about this game's dev staff. The producer for this game was Yoshiaki Yamada, who started as a programmer on King Kong 2 Ikari no Megaton Punch for the Famicom. He then worked on The Goonies 2, programmed Track and Field 2 and roller games, was a co-operator on the Turbografx version of Snatcher before being the director of Datana Twinbee and the producer on Vulcan Venture. After Rondo of Blood, he was a producer on Martial Champion for the Turbografx, a co-operator on the Turbografx version of Tokimeki Memorial 1, and most recently, albeit recent as in quotations here, was a server programmer on Wizardry Online alongside being a game tester for Dragon Quest XI. Next up is the game's character designers. 4 people are listed, but we only know the identities of 3 of them. There's Toshiharu Furukawa, credited as T. Furukawa, Reika Bando, credited as RB, Koji Yamada, oh my god, I should have died there, but I didn't, credited as K. Yamada, and Kuro, with an exclamation point at the end. We do not know the identity of that last person as far as I'm aware. Toshiharu Furukawa started as a sound designer on King's Valley 2 for the MSX, and was a designer on Rampart for the NES. They pulled support on Axley as well as Snatcher on Turbografx and were a graphic designer for Bucky O'Hare on the NES right before they worked on this game. Post Rondo of Blood, they were a designer and scenario writer for Symphony of the Night before doing stage design for Gun Gauge, design period for Tokimeki Memorial 2, graphics work on Castlevania Chronicles, and seemingly their final credit so far was being a designer on DDR Second Mix for the Dreamcast. Seemingly after that, they dropped out of the industry period, and for my own sanity, I'm going to guess they're not the same Toshiharu Furukawa, who's apparently a member of Japan's nationalist and conservative Liberal Democratic Party. Pulling back the curtain, there's actually been a couple times that's happened in more recent memory when I've been looking at the staff for LPs. If I look up a person's name to see what they've been doing maybe since they dropped off the face of the earth. In a couple of cases, there's just been a politician that has the exact same name, but as far as I can tell, they are seldom the same person. It's just a factor of people will have the same name sometimes. That just happens. Going back to the character designers, though, Reika Bando started as a designer on Datana Twinbee before being a graphic designer on Vulcan Venture. After Rondo of Blood, she was a designer on Sparkster for Super Nintendo, specifically Animaniacs on Genesis and Symphony of the Night. She was then a main designer for Eldergate, that RPG we brought up in Circle of the Moon that Igarashi was directing while Circle of the Moon was being made in the background. Reika Bando's last non-re-release role was as a designer on DDR Disney Mix. After that, they seemingly just dropped off the face of the earth, as we've seen happen with many other devs. This is the Red Axe Knight. They really like doing that charge, and I have a really bad time dodging it if I'm playing as Richter. Even as Maria, that axe swing is really hard to get over. This is a case where you really just gotta feel it out, but all the same, watch out for the ball and chain in the distance. This is the one I brought up earlier. While it's swinging around, you can deal damage to it to make it get some kinks in its swing and just make it get a really weird arc. And you can use that to your advantage to actually make it really easy to get around. The big issue is doing that while there's also a platform you need to jump on that's also moving at the same time. We're now coming up on the route split for this specific stage, and I'm going to go through the alternate route as Richter right now, because I want to go to the main route with Maria just so I don't have to worry about this jump up there as much. To get to the alternate route, whip this wall and hit that bomb, and let it blow up that wall. Thankfully, while it's exploding, you're completely invincible, so that chain ball hitting me actively does nothing. We now have another hallway ahead of us that's full of Axe Knights, be it the blue or red ones, alongside some other enemies. While we crawl through this along the way, might as well note the final character designer we know the identity of, Koji Yamada. Rondo of Blood was actively their first credit, followed by being a graphic designer for Animaniacs on Genesis, doing title and ending demo work for Suikoden 2, but easily their most famous project is being the character designer, additional designer, and scenario writer for Azure Dreams, which was a Konami monster taming dungeon crawler for the PS1 that was really unique and honestly really impressive. It also got a Game Boy Color port that was bizarrely competent compared to a lot of other ports of games of that era to handhelds. Next up, we have this game's programmers. 3 people are listed: Toru Hagihara, Gagensai F, and Shingo Takatsuka. Hagihara started as a bug tester for The Adventures of Bayou Billy on the NES and then was a programmer for Top Gun: The Second Mission. After that, they were also a programmer for Operation C in Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge on Game Boy, alongside Tiny Toons Adventures Bab's Big Break on the same system. They were then a programmer for this, alongside being this game's sole director. Post Rondo of Blood, they were scenario coder for Azure Dreams, a producer on both Vandal Hearts 2 and Eldergate, before being either a product manager on projects like Castlevania Chronicles, or a supporter or subdirector on projects like Metal Slug 5, Elevates, Twinbee Portable, and the like. Their last non-re-release project was working as a supervisor on Konami Classic Series arcade hits for the Nintendo DS. Gagensai F started on this game as a programmer before doing programming work on the Sega Saturn release of Tokimeki Memorial 1, alongside doing work on that game's title screen loop. They were then a programmer on Symphony of the Night, with their only other credit being as a quote-unquote super helper on Breeding Stud Bokujo de Amaisho, a 1997 racehorse sim for the PS1. Before I talk about the third programmer, it's time for the alternate boss of the Stage 4s. And here is a good old face we've been seeing since Castlevania 2, it's time for Carmilla. They even referenced her original sprite here before immediately shedding it away for the proper skull and lady on top of it that we're more used to nowadays. Camilla's only really got one trick to herself, namely she's going to float about the arena and cry tears of blood from the skull, which will land on the floor and then erupt into 4 bits of fire that go in arcs across the screen. With that said, she's not alone here. She's got a little servant here named Laura. Laura will walk about the floor, and if you make contact with her, she'll grab you for a hug/kiss. This leaves you open for attack from Carmilla outright, of course, but it will also drain you of your hearts. Thankfully not permanently, as they do just get sucked out of you and into the area around you, but you do need to recollect them. I'd recommend opening up with an item crash like Hydrostorm if you can, just to get as much damage in as you can. With that said, Camilla's dim, but we still got a little bit of health left. That's because we now need to take care of Laura. Upon hitting her, she'll jump out and just start doing some jump kicks at you, which are pretty easy to get hit by, not for nothing. Out of all the bosses in the game, it's also probably the most unique desperation attack, even if it's one that can outright kill you still. And upon defeating her, she also drops a load of hearts, which, hey, is really good to get some extra points in the mission clear screen if you don't try to be fancy and collect the stage clear orb while doing Hydrostorm like I just did. Oopsie. But on a bit of an odd note, defeating this alternate boss in Stage 4 takes us to main Stage 5. Curious. More on why that happens later on. For right now, it's time for us to start our run through Stage 4 as Maria, and while my main goal here is to showcase the other boss fight, I also do want to showcase the alternate route you can take from this switch if you go up these stairs. Also, because I haven't mentioned it yet, main Stage 5 plays a version of Beginning that's also really good. With that said, out of the classic songs returning for this game, it's probably my least favorite of the new mixes. While I go through this route, time for us to go through the last programmer, namely Shingo Takatsuka. They started as a programmer on Vulcan Venture for the Turbografx, then were immediately on Rondo of Blood. Post-Rondo, they were a programmer on Tiny Toons Adventures, Acme All-Stars, before being thrown full force into Konami's sports game divisions. Starting from 1996's Goalstorm on the PS1, all the way to being a supervising director on Pro Evolution Soccer titles as recently as 2019, they were either a director outright, a producer, or a programmer on most World Soccer and PES titles up until 2019. So this route has a few extra switches that if you jump on them, sometimes hazards will activate, sometimes it'll just change what an enemy can do and all that jazz, sometimes it spawns in more enemies like I think the upcoming switch does. But the main reason I actively waited to do this route until I was playing as Maria is because of these thin platforms. Doing these jumps as Richter isn't very hard, but just in case I overshot, I wanted to have the ability to course correct with her double jump. That goes a long way very quickly here. There is one weird little note to this route, though, and that's after this Bone Dragon, there's a set of 3 switches followed by another Bone Dragon. What those switches do is actively determine the drops of both the Bone Dragon I'm currently fighting as well as the one after it. Specifically, they always drop point bags off the top of my head, but depending on which one you step on, the point value of those bags will change. In specific, I want to say jumping on the left one changes them to 700 bags. So between the 2 Bone Dragons, you can get 14 bags worth 700 points, which might sound ironically rather pointless, but there is actively a purpose to points in this game compared to most other games. Specifically, you might notice whenever I pause the game, next to my life count, there's a counter marked as credits. Those are determined by the amount of points you get in a level. I think it's roughly 1 credit for every 100 to 1,000 points off the top of my head. Future me, correct me on that, please. But as you continue playing the game, revisiting and replaying stages, the credits you earn stay with your save file and can be used from the main menu to purchase boss fight demos, where you can see recordings of developers fighting the various bosses, showcasing some good strategies, all the like. It's also how you're meant to learn about Maria's little secret technique where she throws the little ninja ghost out of her. Either way, time for the main boss of the 2 stage 4s. This is the Dullahan. This guy mostly fights with his lance, namely using it either in a forward stab with a deceptively long range like so, a jump forward into a downward stab into the ground, as well as a rather hard to read at first stab into the ground outright, where he causes an ice wave to move forward from his starting location. Maria can double jump over that, but as Richter, you'll want to use the surrounding platforms to avoid it. The Dullahan can also throw its head into the air for 2 specific attacks, one where the head just constantly tracks onto you while the body remains still, and the other where the head will vibrate in place causing the screen to shake and then rocks will drop from the ceiling. That one's surprisingly tough to dodge. Upon death, the Dullahan's pitch attack is to throw its head into the air once again, where it will then explode into a spread shot that goes across the screen. But if memory serves, if you actively kill the Dullahan while the head is already airborne, that just cancels the pinch attack for some reason. And for some reason, like with the alternate exit, beating the main boss of stage 4 takes us once again to main stage 5. Curious. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're gonna go tackle alternate stage 4 before starting on the stage 5s. See you guys then.